This is the Sleep Historian. Each night we explore the echoes of the past, stories told slowly to calm the mind and ease you towards sleep. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through time, please like and subscribe, and let the next story begin. Before cannons, before treaties, before a coastline opens to the world, there is tea. Pale steam rising from porcelain, a lid set down with a soft click. In the early 19th century, the Qing Empire feels immense, ordered, and old in the way mountains feel old. River barges glide through mist. Courtyards hold steady routines. Officials move through red gates polished by generations of hands. Far south, foreign ships wait beyond the river mouth, their rigging lightly tapping in sea wind. What they want is simple to name: tea, silk, porcelain. What they bring is pressure, quiet at first, then persistent. Beyond China, factories hum and ledgers thicken. In Britain, tea becomes daily comfort, and daily comfort becomes demand. Silver flows outward to pay for it, and the flow begins to worry men who think in columns and totals. In the south of China, trade is narrowed into one place, Guangzhou. Foreign merchants stay behind walls, watched and limited. Chinese merchants carry responsibility like a weight, negotiating in heat that smells of river mud, incense, and tea chests. Everything appears controlled, yet imbalance grows. When a system cannot rebalance by ordinary trade, it searches for another cargo, one that travels easily and quietly changes what it touches. Time drifts to the Pearl River Delta. Morning light is soft on brown water, and the air is heavy with humidity. Near the foreign factories in Guangzhou, merchants bend over desks, sealing letters with wax that cools quickly. Tea is weighed and packed with practiced hands. Porcelain is wrapped in straw. A Chinese clerk pauses to wet his brush, then writes a clean line in a ledger, the paper slightly rippling from the damp air. The trade feels calm, even elegant. But the silver that enters China does not return in equal measure. Far away, in offices that smell of ink and coal smoke, that imbalance turns into a question with teeth. How do you make the silver flow back? The scene shifts to Britain's hunger for tea, kitchens warmed by coal, cups refilled without thought. Sugar dissolves, conversation continues. On paper, the comfort becomes import figures, and import figures become urgency. In London offices, men study the numbers with quiet concern. They see silver leaving Britain for Chinese goods, and they see China buying little in return. It is not hatred, it is arithmetic. The East India Company controls poppy cultivation in India, and the solution begins to form in margins and meetings. Sell a product China cannot resist. Not wool, not machines. Something smaller, denser, easier to hide. A drug already known, now scaled into policy. You move to fields in Bengal under bright, dry light. Poppies stand in rows, delicate flowers above green pods. Farmers bend low, making small cuts. Milky latex beads, then darkens as it dries. In a processing room nearby, the smell changes, earthy, sharp, faintly sweet. Opium is collected, pressed and shaped into cakes. A clerk turns pages in a ledger, pausing briefly, then writing again with steady certainty. Nothing here looks like chaos. It looks like system. By the time the cargo is packed and stamped, it no longer feels like a plant. It feels like an answer prepared by distant hands, an answer that will travel across water and into lives it does not know. Back along China's coast, the water is busy with small boats. Lanterns glow low at night. Oars dip softly. Beyond official reach, foreign ships anchor in deeper water, waiting with quiet patience. A bundle wrapped in oilcloth is lifted, passed forward, then hidden beneath baskets and ordinary goods. The exchange is practiced, almost polite. The sea wind carries salt and smoke from cooking fires along the shore. At first, opium arrives in small amounts, a private vice tucked into corners. Then it circulates more widely, pulled along by profit and habit. Its cost does not announce itself in one moment. It accumulates, silver flowing out, health weakening, and trust thinning where bribes begin to replace enforcement. Inside a modest room, a small lamp burns steadily. The air is warm and still. Someone prepares a pipe with careful motions, heating, lifting a small bead until it softens and darkens. Ceramic taps gently against metal. For a moment, the face relaxes, shoulders loosen. It can look like relief. Outside, though, time continues. Work remains. Families still need food. Debts still arrive. Opium's damage is slow. It does not always arrive as drama. It arrives as missed hours, sold belongings, dulled attention. It settles like dust on a household, thin layers, day by day, until a room feels heavier and a life narrower, without anyone being able to name the exact day it changed. In Beijing, distance from the coast feels immense. Courtyards are crisp in cold air. Memorials move through bureaucracy, brushed onto paper, sealed, and carried across the city. Reports arrive from the south. Smuggling, addiction, silver outflow, officials taking bribes. A minister writes with neat care, as if order on the page can restore order in the world. The Daoguang emperor grows increasingly alarmed. This is not yet a foreign invasion. It is a leak in the empire's foundations. The Qing state depends on stable revenue and reliable officials. When silver drains away and enforcement becomes negotiable, the empire feels less solid. It still stands tall, but it begins to feel tired, as if holding itself upright takes more effort than before. Time drifts to 1839, to Guangzhou in heavy heat. Commissioner Lin Zexu arrives with a clear mandate: stop the opium trade. His presence makes rooms quieter. His discipline feels like cold water poured over complacency. Orders are issued. Chinese merchants are pressured to cooperate. Foreign merchants are confined. Boat movements are watched more closely. Lin writes to Queen Victoria, appealing to fairness and law, insisting that a sovereign state has the right to protect its people. In Lin's frame, opium is not commerce, it is poison. He moves through offices where paper fans stir slowly and ink dries on fresh directives. A clerk folds a notice with careful corners, then hands it to a runner. The crackdown becomes real, physical, and unavoidable. At Human, near the Pearl River mouth, the turning point takes a tangible shape. Thousands of opium chests are stacked like a dark wall. Workers pry them open. The smell is strong, unfamiliar, and mingles with sea wind. Opium is mixed with lime and salt water in trenches, stirred until it breaks down, then flushed away. A laborer wipes sweat from his brow and returns to the work. Lin supervises with calm resolve, making law visible. For China, it is enforcement. For British merchants, it is property seized. The same scene holds two meanings, and both are sharp. After human, the trade dispute is no longer abstract. It becomes a question of power. Who decides what can enter China, and what happens when an empire insists? The coast grows watchful. Ships sit low in the water, cannons quiet but present. In late 1839, clashes begin, small, localized, carrying the feel of argument turning hard. You stand on a shoreline where surf taps steadily against rock. The sound is gentle, but the air holds tension. Orders travel on paper. Flags signal across distance. Britain demands compensation and broader access to trade. Qing officials insist on sovereign control. War does not always begin with a single thunderclap. Sometimes it begins with narrowing choices. When letters and negotiations fail to settle the dispute, force becomes the language left on the table. The sea, once a route for cargo, starts to feel like a boundary between two systems that cannot agree on rules. In 1840, British forces arrive in greater strength. Steam-powered gunboats move with unsettling control, independent of wind. Their metal hulls and organized firepower feel modern against older coastal defenses. From a fort, you watch smoke drift, then thin in damp air. Between bursts of action there is waiting, men adjusting uniforms, checking powder, listening to distant commands. Chinese soldiers hold positions with courage, but equipment and training vary widely. The disparity is not only military, it is structural. An empire designed for internal order, facing an industrial power projecting force across oceans. The conflict unfolds as pressure applied along the coast, port by port. Even when the fighting is intense, the rhythm is often slow, steady, and relentless, like a tide that keeps returning. The camera drifts inland. Blockades and disruption ripple through markets and households. Prices shift. Cargo arrives late or not at all. A vendor counts coins twice before accepting them, then tucks them away as if they might evaporate. Opium continues to move, despite crackdowns. The war itself signals that the trade will not be easily suppressed. Corruption spreads around enforcement. Some officials take bribes to look away. Others are punished for failures they cannot prevent. In Beijing, debates deepen into factions. Each group believes it sees the path forward. Yet the empire is now managing multiple pressures at once. Foreign force at the coast, fiscal strain at the center, and social harm creeping through everyday life. The Qing state still has authority, but it begins to feel stretched, like fabric pulled tight. By 1842, the conflict concludes under weight of strategy and exhaustion. British forces push toward the Yangtze, threatening vital economic arteries. Negotiations carry a feeling of inevitability. In a room near water, documents are laid out. Seals are prepared. Faces remain controlled. The Treaty of Nanking is signed in August 1842. Its terms are clear and heavy. A large indemnity, the cession of Hong Kong, and the opening of 5 treaty ports, Canton, Xiamen, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai. A Chinese official presses a seal into ink, then onto paper. The red mark spreads slightly at the edges. It is a small gesture, almost quiet. Yet it changes the architecture of trade and law. The empire still stands, but new doors have been forced open. Treaty ports begin to transform coastal life. In Shanghai, warehouses rise beside traditional shops. Consulates appear, streets widen, signboards multiply. The air smells of river mud and coal smoke from ships. You walk along the waterfront where masts crowd together like reeds. A Chinese porter shifts a crate against his shoulder, then continues without looking up. Foreign enclaves form, governed by different laws. Extraterritoriality means foreign nationals answer to their own courts. Tariffs are fixed. Indemnities loom. The changes are administrative, but they feel personal. A city becomes layered. Chinese authority in some lanes, foreign authority in others. The Qing state's control loosens in the places where it meets the world. Trade continues, busy and profitable, yet sovereignty begins to feel negotiated rather than assumed. Opium use expands. Silver that once flowed inward now flows outward in large amounts, unsettling fiscal stability. The effect reaches beyond elites. It touches soldiers, clerks, craftsmen, laborers. You return to a quiet interior. A hand hovers over a pipe, careful and practiced. Outside, morning light falls into a courtyard where a child draws lines in dust with a stick. The ordinary and the damaged sit side by side. Officials attempt bans and reforms, but enforcement is uneven. Some enforcers are themselves users. Smuggling adapts. Profit finds routes. Opium becomes embedded in networks that cross borders and departments. It does not destroy the empire in one dramatic act. It hollows parts of it while other pressures widen openings. The result feels gradual, like a structure weakening from within as weather gathers outside. Other powers follow Britain's example. New treaties are demanded. New privileges appear. The Qing court faces a spreading pattern. Negotiation under threat. Concessions framed as peace. Foreign presence expanding along the coast. In an office, a clerk unrolls a map. Ports are marked, rivers traced. Notes are added in neat strokes. Each mark represents a compromise, and each compromise is remembered by someone as loss. Outside, farmers plant rice. Merchants sell cloth. Students recite classics. Life continues, but the empire's confidence changes. It now recognizes a world of competing industrial powers, not a periphery paying tribute. That recognition is quiet, almost private, yet it shifts everything. The Qing state is still vast, still sophisticated, but it begins to move differently, less like an unshakable center, more like a government managing risk across too many fronts. Internal strain deepens. Population pressure, land scarcity, and corruption create restlessness. Local officials carry heavy responsibilities with limited resources. When harvests fail, suffering is immediate. When policy fails, consequences spread slowly. You stand outside a county office. Paper stacks rise inside like small walls. A magistrate's assistant warms his hands over a brazier, then resumes writing. Villagers wait with tired faces, hands tucked inside sleeves. Opium is part of this landscape now, but not the only force. It interacts with existing vulnerabilities and magnifies them. Silver outflow and treaty constraints make relief harder. Local hardship becomes more likely to turn into unrest. The empire still has grandeur, ritual, art, scholarship, but stability shifts from something assumed to something managed each season with growing difficulty. Time drifts into the 1850s, and the camera pulls back to show China's scale. Rivers like moving roads, plains of crops, mountain passes where caravans move slowly. The Qing Empire remains a great civilization, yet now under strain on multiple fronts. You stand beside the Yangtze as barges pass, poles dipping with soft splashes. News travels this way: defeats, demands, rumors. In 1850, the Taiping Rebellion begins, fueled by deep social misery and fierce belief. It will devastate wide regions and drain the state. This crisis is not caused by opium, yet the empire's weakened finances and compromised enforcement make response harder. The story becomes one of compounded pressure: foreign demands on the coast, rebellion inland, and social harm spreading through households. The empire still stands, but now it is fighting to keep its shape. In southern towns, foreign trade and local hardship coexist uneasily. Opium dens operate behind ordinary doorways. Foreign merchants profit. Chinese intermediaries profit too. The line between illegal and official blurs. You pass a medicine shop: ginseng, dried peel, powders in paper packets. The herbalist measures with steady hands. Just down the lane, a different medicine is prepared in smoke and heat. The contrast is quiet, almost painful in its normality. Officials issue bans, yet enforcement varies from district to district. Some soldiers tasked with stopping opium use it themselves. In this environment, moral authority becomes difficult to project. The empire tries to maintain dignity while navigating realities that erode it. The damage is not always visible in one place, but it is visible in patterns: lost labor, missing silver, and the growing habit of solving problems with bribes rather than law. In 1856, a small incident becomes a spark. The Arrow Affair begins when Chinese authorities board a ship registered under the British flag and arrest Chinese crew suspected of piracy. Britain claims insult. France joins, citing the execution of a missionary. The Second Opium War begins, framed by foreign powers as defense of treaty rights, and by Qing officials as intrusion. You stand near the river where foreign ships sit in disciplined formation. Damp air presses on skin. A faint smell of gunpowder lingers from earlier exchanges. The conflict is larger than the incident. It is about access, more ports, more privileges, and the fate of opium itself. A clerk folds dispatches with careful corners, seals them, and sends them onward. Paper moves quickly. The consequences move slower, but heavier. The war expands north. By 1858, British and French forces push toward Tianjin, near the route to Beijing. The Qing court, facing military pressure and internal rebellion, negotiates. The treaties of Tianjin are signed, promising more treaty ports and foreign legations in the capital. You watch documents laid out on a table, inkstones beside brushes, European pens scratching in parallel. The room is quiet, controlled, almost polite. Outside, the river keeps moving, indifferent. These treaties do not feel like mutual agreement. They feel like a pause taken under threat. The empire's autonomy narrows further, not through sudden collapse, but through a steady shifting of terms. The state still governs, but with new constraints. And behind those constraints sits a growing reality. Opium is becoming harder to deny, harder to control, and easier for others to demand. Resistance follows. In 1859, foreign envoys attempt to travel to Beijing to ratify treaties, and conflict erupts near the Taku forts. Chinese defenses inflict significant losses. For a moment, the empire's ability to push back feels restored. You stand on a muddy shoreline. Fortifications rise low and solid. Soldiers check fuses with steady hands. The sea wind is cold and sharp. Victory brings a brief lift, but it also invites return. In 1860, foreign forces come again in greater strength, better prepared, advancing with modern logistics. Even when courage is strong, resources matter. The West has learned that pressure works. The Qing court has learned that defending one point does not end demands. It can intensify them. The rhythm becomes familiar. Resistance, retaliation, negotiation under strain. Each cycle leaves the state a little more exhausted. The camera moves toward Beijing in 1860. Autumn light is pale. Trees hold fading leaves. Foreign troops approach the capital. The Xianfeng emperor flees to Jehol, and the city feels like it is holding its breath. Couriers arrive with dust on their sleeves, kneel, offer documents, withdraw. Negotiations continue, but violence does not pause. In October, foreign forces burn and loot the old summer palace, the Yuan Ming Yuan, an act meant as punishment and message. You imagine the glow reflected on water, smoke drifting over gardens designed for peace. The loss is cultural as much as political, a wound that becomes memory. The empire's dignity is shaken in a way treaties alone could not do. In quiet corridors, officials speak less, as if words might crack under the weight. With Beijing under pressure, the Convention of Peking is signed in 1860, confirming and expanding earlier treaties. Indemnities increase. More ports open. Kowloon is ceded to Britain. Foreign legations are allowed in the capital, and opium is legalized. The formal stance that it can be excluded collapses into regulation and profit. You stand in a quiet room where seals press into paper again. A hand hesitates briefly, then completes the gesture. Outside, winter air sharpens, and ordinary city sounds continue. Vendors, carts, distant bells, as if daily life insists on normality. Legalization does not end addiction. It stabilizes revenue and makes the trade harder to challenge. The empire trades moral insistence for fragile peace under foreign terms. The shift is calm on paper and enormous in consequence. The 1860s and 1870s unfold with layered recovery and strain. The Taiping Rebellion is suppressed in 1864, leaving devastation behind. The Qing state attempts rebuilding through the self-strengthening movement. Arsenals, shipyards, translated texts, modern schools. You walk through a workshop where iron rings under hammers. Sparks rise and fade. Coal smoke catches in the throat. Nearby, a young student copies foreign technical terms with careful strokes, brow furrowed in concentration. The empire is not passively collapsing. It is trying to adapt while preserving its moral and administrative core. Yet the treaties remain. Foreign influence remains. Opium remains, now legal, now widespread, continuing to drain lives and silver. The Qing still has grandeur and intelligence, but it is now working within a tightened frame, building strength while carrying weight. Daily life in a treaty port carries a new texture. In Shanghai, the riverfront is busy with porters and carts. Foreign-style buildings rise beside traditional shops. Signs in multiple languages hang over doorways. The air smells of damp stone, tea leaves, and coal smoke. You move through a market where vegetables lie in neat piles and fish glisten on wet boards. A foreign clerk checks invoices, lips moving silently as he counts. A Chinese shopkeeper folds paper carefully around goods, fingers quick and practiced. The city feels alive, expanding, absorbing people from inland provinces seeking wages. Yet law is layered. One street governed by Qing officials, another by foreign councils. Authority becomes uneven, and everyone learns which rules apply where. The empire still exists here, but in the background, like an older rhythm under new noise. Opium becomes visible in subtle ways, not always in dramatic scenes, but in small changes. A worker arriving late, eyes dull. A household selling trinkets to cover quiet debts. A soldier whose posture sags when duty begins. You sit in a tea house. Conversation is low. Cups are refilled. A bamboo blind clicks gently in the breeze. Someone in the corner rubs fingertips together as if counting something invisible. Outside, a rickshaw runner passes, feet slapping softly against stone. The city's energy continues, but some of it feels diverted into private rooms where time slows unnaturally. Opium does not stop ships from docking or markets from opening. It changes people one by one until the cumulative effect becomes social. Lost labor, strained families, and the quiet normalization of dependence. The Qing bureaucracy keeps working, but with growing difficulty. Officials must collect taxes, manage floods, address famine, keep order, and satisfy treaty obligations. Resources are limited. Revenue is pledged to indemnities or lost through corruption. You stand in a county office where paper stacks rise like small walls. Ink smells sharp and familiar. An assistant warms his hands near a brazier, then resumes writing. Outside the yamen, villagers wait, faces weathered, eyes tired, hands folded inside sleeves. Here, the empire feels human, not a grand abstraction, but a network of rooms like this, each trying to keep a community stable. Opium's role is often indirect, draining labor, encouraging bribes, weakening enforcement. Governance becomes a daily balancing act, and the balance grows harder to hold. Beyond cities, rural life remains rooted in seasons. Rice paddies reflect a gray sky. Water buffalo move slowly, hooves sinking into mud with soft suction sounds. Farmers bend low, backs forming steady arcs. Yet the 19th century brings instability. Floods ruin crops, drought follows. Banditry increases when desperation grows. Migrants travel toward cities carrying bundles wrapped in cloth, hoping for wages. You watch a family pause by a roadside, sharing a small meal. The father tears bread into pieces with quiet fairness. Opium enters some rural lives as pain relief, then habit, then burden. Even where it does not, the broader system is strained by silver outflow and treaty constraints. Relief becomes harder. Small shocks become bigger. The empire's strength has always depended on this quiet labor, and when labor weakens, everything above it shakes. Foreign presence expands not only through trade, but through missionaries, schools, and clinics. In some places, these bring medicine and education. In others, they spark suspicion and conflict, shaped by misunderstanding and fear. You step into a small clinic. The air smells of soap and alcohol. Bottles line a shelf. A Chinese assistant wipes a table carefully, then hands over a folded cloth. Outside, a few onlookers watch, uncertain. New knowledge arrives, but so does the feeling of intrusion. For Qing officials, managing these encounters becomes another layer of complexity, maintaining legitimacy while navigating foreign demands and local anxieties. Opium sits within this web as both substance and symbol, associated with foreign pressure, yet now part of regulated commerce. The contradiction is quiet, but it sharpens resentment. Canton remains a major trade node, but its old rhythm is changed. The Canton system's tight control is gone. Foreign gunboats can appear with quiet authority. Consuls intervene. Merchants negotiate under new terms. You walk along the river at dusk. Lanterns reflect in ripples. The sound of unloading, wood on wood, rope tightening, voices calling, stays steady. Yet the emotional weight has shifted. Opportunity exists, but so does humiliation, the knowledge that rules were altered under threat. For officials, enforcement feels less effective when treaties limit authority. Opium flows in this environment as a normalized good, taxed and distributed, its harm no less real for being legal. The empire's greatest strength, its sense of order, begins to feel compromised in the very places where it meets the world most directly. Within Qing society, responses vary. Some call for deeper reform, modern armies, industry, new education. Others fear that change threatens the moral foundation of the state. Scholars debate in quiet rooms, arguments shaped by classics and by the new reality of steamships and treaties. You sit in a study. A lamp glows softly against paper. A scholar turns a page slowly, pauses at a passage, then writes a small note in the margin. Outside, rain begins on tiled roofs, a gentle tapping that feels indifferent to human worry. The empire's greatness is not only territory. It is an intellectual and moral system once thought sufficient. Now it faces evidence that sufficiency is not protection. Opium becomes both a daily harm and a national emblem of lost control. Debates remain calm, but urgency runs beneath them like a current. The chapter closes in a household at night. A brazier glows. A mother folds clothing by lamplight, smoothing fabric with slow care. A child sleeps, breath quiet and even. In the next room, an older relative coughs softly, then the sound fades. In many homes, opium enters as coping, pain relief, stress relief, a brief softening of hardship. It is not always decadent. Sometimes it is desperation. Yet its effect accumulates. Money diverted, health weakened, attention narrowed. Outside, the city continues. Distant footsteps, a cartwheel, a boat horn on the river, long and low. The empire's decline is rarely visible as one dramatic collapse. It is thousands of small scenes like this, scattered across provinces, ordinary lives adjusting to extraordinary pressure, trying to stay intact. Deep calm comes before another tightening. By the late 19th century, open war pauses at times, but treaties remain like weight on the state's shoulders. Ports function, indemnities are paid, foreign enclaves expand. The Qing court attempts modernization in careful doses. You stand in a shipyard where iron plates are fitted and rivets ring under hammers. The smell of oil and hot metal hangs in the air. Men work in disciplined rhythms, then pause to wipe sweat and check measurements. In a classroom, students copy foreign diagrams, ink drying slowly. The empire is trying to strengthen itself while preserving its identity. Yet opium remains widespread, legal, profitable, deeply embedded. It softens pain for some, but it also softens will, making sustained reform harder. The water looks calm, but underneath it moves fast. Court attention shifts between crises, floods, famine relief, rebellion suppression, foreign negotiation. A state that once drew authority from ritual must now manage industrial-era geopolitics. Each demand chips at capacity. You watch an official in a winter robe warm his hands near a brazier. He lifts a memorial, eyes moving steadily across lines of text. Outside, snow falls lightly in a courtyard, muffling footsteps. The empire still values order. It still believes stability can be restored. Yet stability now requires continuous effort, and continuous effort is undermined by continuous leakage. Money, energy, legitimacy. Opium is not the only leak, but it is persistent and difficult to stop without creating new conflict. Some officials tolerate it for revenue, others condemn it as moral ruin. The state's posture becomes strained, upright in ceremony, weary in practice. Cities modernize unevenly. Telegraph wires stretch thin across streets. Steamships crowd harbors. Foreign banks expand. Chinese entrepreneurs open factories. There is innovation, and there is fragmentation. You walk past a storefront advertising Western medicines, then past an apothecary with drawers labeled in neat calligraphy. A man sits on a step, eyes unfocused, as if listening to something distant. Nearby, workers hurry by with lunch tins clinking softly. The contrast is quiet, not theatrical. Society moves in multiple directions at once, toward modernization, toward new inequalities, toward survival. The Qing state struggles to coordinate that movement, while treaties constrain tariffs, and law remains patchwork in treaty ports. Opium follows the same routes as progress, refusing to disappear, altering lives in the background, while nations discuss reform in the foreground. A turning point approaches from beyond China's borders. In 1894, war breaks out with Japan over influence in Korea. It becomes a test of modernization. Japan fields a reorganized military and navy. Qing forces fight, but they are hampered by corruption, uneven training, and divided command. You stand on a cold shoreline. Wind carries salt. Gray light sits low on restless water. In a naval office, an officer adjusts his cap, checks a chart, then looks up with tired eyes. The war ends in 1895 with the Treaty of Shimonoseki. Taiwan ceded, a large indemnity paid, Korea's independence recognized. Foreign powers see weakness and press harder, carving spheres of influence. Opium did not cause the defeat, but a state already drained has less resilience. Another weight is added. The late 1890s feel like tightening constraints. Foreign loans and rail concessions expand. Missionary presence grows. Ports become nodes of global finance. The Qing court attempts reform in bursts, most famously the 100 Days Reform of 1898, driven by the Guangxu emperor and reformers who want modern schools and administration. You sit in a palace corridor where curtains stir in a faint breeze. Paper screens glow softly with daylight. A eunuch moves silently carrying a tray, eyes lowered. Reform here is dangerous because it threatens entrenched interests. The Empress Dowager Cixi intervenes, ending the reform movement and placing the emperor under house arrest. The moment is outwardly calm, yet decisive. The state remains caught between the need to change and fear of losing itself. Opium, still widespread, remains both symptom and symbol of that trapped condition. Resentment builds at street level. The Boxer movement grows in northern China, blending anti-foreign sentiment with local grievances and spiritual practice. The Qing court hesitates, then aligns with the Boxers in a risky attempt to restore sovereignty. You stand near a village road where dust rises under hurried feet. A gong sounds once, then again. Faces are tense, determined. In Beijing, foreign legations are besieged in 1900. The response is overwhelming. An 8-nation alliance defeats Qing and Boxer forces and occupies the capital. The Boxer Protocol of 1901 imposes another massive indemnity and deeper restrictions. The city afterwards feels exhausted and watched. Opium again is not the sole cause, but it sits among the symbols of intrusion and weakness. The empire's dignity feels worn down, like stone under steady water. After 1901, reforms accelerate. New schools spread. Military modernization expands. Administrative changes promise a constitutional future. The Qing state tries to rebuild legitimacy by offering change rather than denial. You walk through a classroom where students sit at wooden desks. Ink bottles stand open. A teacher points to a blackboard, chalk squeaking softly. Outside, a soldier drills with a modern rifle, metal clicking with precise rhythm. These scenes carry hope, but also lateness. Decades of treaties have altered the economy and authority of the state. Foreign privileges remain in ports. Revenue remains constrained. Opium persists in many regions, now regulated, sometimes replaced by newer drugs. Its social damage still real. Reform feels like repairing a roof while rain continues. The effort matters, yet the structure is already weakened. By the early 1910s, the Qing Empire still exists formally, but power has shifted. Provincial elites and military leaders hold more autonomy. Revolutionary ideas circulate through newspapers and secret societies. People speak of nation in a modern sense, not only dynasty. You stand on a train platform under cold eaves. A locomotive exhales steam. Travelers clutch bundles and papers. A newspaper is read, folded, then read again by someone else. In 1911, the Wuchang Uprising sparks a chain reaction. Provinces declare separation. The empire begins to unfasten. This end is not a single explosion. It is a steady release of bonds. Opium did not topple the Qing alone, but over a century, it helped drain revenue, weaken enforcement, and provide a lever for foreign coercion. When the final strain arrives, the old structure cannot hold as it once did. The final turning point arrives with quiet formality. In early 1912, the last Qing emperor Puyi, still a child, abdicates. In the Forbidden City, winter light falls pale on red walls and stone courtyards. The air is cold. Footsteps echo softly in long corridors. You imagine a document being prepared, seals and signatures arranged with careful restraint. Outside the palace, flags change, titles change. The city continues to sell food, pull carts, open shop doors as usual. The fall of the Qing does not end hardship. It ends a political structure that once held vast territory together. When people later say opium destroyed China's greatest empire, they are often naming a slow weakening, addiction spreading through society, corruption increasing, silver draining away, and moral authority eroding, while foreign pressure turned those weaknesses into openings. The dynasty's end becomes the quiet conclusion to a century of strain. Reflection widens to the long arc. Opium's impact is direct and indirect. Directly, it affects bodies, health, attention, labor, family stability. Indirectly, it affects systems, currency flows, bribery, the credibility of laws that cannot be enforced. You sit in an archive space. Dust motes drift in light from a high window. Paper smells faintly of age. A historian turns pages carefully, pausing at an opium memorial, then at a treaty clause, then at an account of local famine. The pattern grows clearer with each page. Opium is one thread in a web of pressures, but it runs through many parts of society. It touches merchants and peasants, soldiers and scholars. It becomes both commodity and symbol, used as a pretext for war, and a real chemical pull reshaping lives. The empire's decline is not a single fall. It is a long descent, taken step by step. The consequences continue after the dynasty ends. In the Republic era, warlordism spreads. Foreign privileges remain in treaty ports. Opium production and trafficking persist, sometimes intensifying, now tied to unstable governance and regional militaries. You stand in a museum gallery where artifacts rest behind glass. Treaties, maps, pipes, photographs of concessions. The room is cool and quiet. Visitors move slowly, reading labels, faces thoughtful. The memory of unequal treaties becomes part of national identity, and the Opium Wars become a shorthand for a wider experience of humiliation. Yet within the narrative, there are individual lives, families adjusting, officials choosing between bad options, reformers trying to keep pace with change. The history is not only diplomatic, it is human scale, carried in private consequences. A household budget, a weakened worker, a compromised official, a city street governed by two sets of rules. Memory gathers these fragments into a single story, then passes it onward. Zoom in again to a household meal. A table holds a bowl of rice and a small dish of vegetables. Chopsticks lie neatly. A father rests his hands on the table edge. knuckles pale from work. A mother pours tea in a thin, steady stream. A child watches, quiet. Somewhere in this city, opium is sold, smoked, taxed, debated, condemned, tolerated. Its presence is not always visible here, but its effects ripple outward. Money diverted, illness worsened, trust eroded when bribery replaces law. The family's life is shaped by systems they cannot control. Treaty-port economies, shifting taxes, political uncertainty. This is how large forces enter daily life, not as speeches, but as small calculations. A coin is turned between fingers once, then set down carefully, as if weighing the future. The scene remains calm, yet heavy with what cannot be said aloud. Pull back to the Qing state itself, seen through hindsight. The empire had real strengths: sophisticated administration, rich cultural life, agricultural productivity, stable routines across vast distances. Its weakness was not lack of civilization. It was a mismatch between an older system and a rapidly changing global environment. You imagine an official in the early 1800s standing in a courtyard, convinced the empire's order is enduring. Stone is cold underfoot. A bell sounds faintly from a nearby hall. That confidence is not foolish. It fits the world as he knows it. But the world expands and accelerates. Industrial power crosses oceans. Markets reshape policy. Opium moves through smuggling routes, then through legal trade, becoming both a tool used by foreign powers and a weakness the state cannot easily control. The empire's greatness is not erased. It is complicated, revealed as something that can be undermined when too many pressures arrive at once, and when damage is allowed to spread quietly for too long. When people say opium destroyed China's greatest empire, the phrase carries emotion: anger, grief, warning. In calm analysis, the picture is layered. Opium did not alone create foreign aggression. It did not alone cause rebellion, famine, or corruption, but it deepened vulnerabilities at critical moments. It drained silver when the state needed revenue. It encouraged bribery within enforcement. It weakened soldiers and workers. It undermined moral authority when bans failed. And it provided a pretext for war that forced treaties reshaping sovereignty. You sit by a river at dusk, watching reflections shiver on water. A boat glides past, oar dipping softly. The scene is peaceful, but the mind holds complexity. History is rarely one cause. It is often convergence, many small leaks and large storms arriving together, changing what once felt permanent. Legacy continues in modern memory and policy. Later governments treat opium as both social problem and political symbol. Campaigns against drugs become tied to national strength and modernization. The memory of unequal treaties becomes a reference point for sovereignty and identity. You walk through a modern street in Guangzhou, where older colonial-era buildings stand beside newer towers. The air smells of rain on stone. Traffic hums softly in the distance. It is hard to imagine this place as the bottleneck of global trade, where chests and ledgers helped reshape world history. Yet geography remains. The river, the humidity, the slow movement of ships. The past is layered beneath the present like older bricks under fresh plaster. You notice a small plaque on a wall marking a historical site. The moment feels like a quiet whisper from another century, reminding you how long memory can last and how softly it can speak when the world is still. And so the story settles into its full arc. An empire confident in its order, a global market hungry for its goods, a trade imbalance turned into policy, opium moving from smuggling to crisis, a crackdown that triggers war, treaties that reshape law and trade, internal rebellions that drain strength, reforms attempted under pressure, a dynasty ending as bonds loosen one by one. You can hold this arc gently without dramatizing it. The Opium Wars and addiction are tragic, but they unfold through human actions. Clerks signing papers, farmers harvesting poppies, officials sealing memorials, families counting coins, soldiers marching under uncertain command. The Qing Empire's greatness was real. So was its vulnerability. Under slow internal erosion and faster external pressure, the old structure could not remain what it was. What endures is the lesson of interconnected forces and the quiet awareness that history often changes through ordinary motions, repeated over time, until the world feels different. Let your thoughts drift through the scenes you have visited. Steam lifting from tea, humid river air in Guangzhou, poppy fields under bright Indian light, the trenches at Human, where opium dissolves into salt water, treaty papers laid out on a table, seals pressed into ink, a treaty port street with foreign signs beside Chinese shop fronts, a quiet home where coins are turned once, then set down. These images soften as they settle. The story is not only conflict, it is systems, trade, law, addiction, pride, pressure, and people moving through them day by day. You do not need to hold every date or name now. Let the timeline loosen. Let the feeling remain. The slow tide of change, and the way small causes and large forces meet. As your breathing steadies, the past can dim like a lantern turned low. The river keeps moving, the paper dries, the night grows quieter. Return now to your own room, where the present is close and familiar. The air around you has its own steady temperature. The sounds you hear belong here, perhaps a distant hum, a soft settling of a building, or only the gentle rhythm of your breathing. Outside, whatever weather exists is held safely at a distance. The Qing Empire's long story can rest now, placed gently back into the past. Riverbanks, courtyards, treaty rooms, crowded ports, each scene grows quieter, as if the lights have been turned down. You do not need to carry the weight of it. Let it dissolve like ink in water, becoming softer and softer. Here you are steady. Here you are safe. Let your thoughts drift away, and let sleep arrive in its own patient time.
you.